It started on a Wednesday, the kind of day that blends into the rest, quiet and unremarkable. I was sipping lukewarm coffee on my porch, wearing socks that didn't match, and watching squirrels argue over birdseed. Just as I reached for my phone to check a delivery status, I noticed the mail truck had already come and gone. Odd, I hadn't heard it, and I always hear it. Our driver, a guy named Dave, usually slams the mailbox shut like he's mad at it. I walked over to my porch and found nothing. No small box, no bubble mailer, not even the coupon spam I normally ignore. I shrugged it off. Maybe Dave skipped me, maybe it was delayed, but it wasn't the first time, or the second. Over the past month I'd noticed little things disappearing. A package here, a box there. At first I thought I was just misplacing them. Maybe I clicked order but forgot to check out. But then I started tracking everything. I checked shipping updates religiously, practically memorized the FedEx driver's route, even signed up for text alerts. And yet, again and again, I'd get the same notification. Delivered. But when I stepped outside, nothing. No package, no clue. I asked around. Neighbor to my left hadn't seen anything. Neighbor to my right had been out of town. A couple across the street said their Halloween decorations had mysteriously vanished the week before, but they chalked it up to teenagers. Still, something felt off. Our neighborhood wasn't crime-ridden. We had HOA meetings about lawn heights and mailbox paint colors. This wasn't the kind of place where you expected porch pirates to prowl. That's when I started to suspect. Not in a paranoid way. In the slow, creeping realization that someone close, too close, might be behind it. You know how sometimes when a pattern forms, your brain starts connecting dots you wish it wouldn't? Every time a package vanished, our HOA president, Karen, just happened to be walking her tiny yappy dog right past my house. She didn't wave. She never waved. Just walked, stiff and judgmental, like the sidewalk owed her rent. One morning, I caught a glimpse of her peering at my porch from behind her aviator sunglasses, that smug little smile barely tugging at her lips. It wasn't enough to accuse anyone. Not yet. But in that moment, with the sun catching the edge of my empty welcome mat, I felt something stir inside me. Not fear, not even anger. Resolve. Because if Karen really was the one stealing my packages, she was about to discover that the quiet guy at the end of the cul-de-sac wasn't so quiet after all. Karen wasn't just the HOA president. She was the self-appointed queen of the cul-de-sac, ruling over our neighborhood with the kind of iron fist usually reserved for medieval monarchs or reality TV villains. You'd know she was approaching before you saw her, thanks to the unmistakable click-clack of her wedge heels on pavement and the high-pitched bark of her over-groomed Pomeranian Sparkles, who wore a different seasonal outfit every week and had more followers on Instagram than I did. Karen carried a clipboard the way a sheriff carries a badge, and she wielded it with the same level of intimidation. She had this uncanny ability to appear out of nowhere whenever someone's garbage bins were an inch too far from the curb, or when a Halloween pumpkin was left out past November 2nd. She'd smile, always with teeth, and then hand over a citation like it was a party favor. I once saw her stop a jogger mid-stride to remind him that reflective gear was strongly recommended in the HOA handbook, which she quoted from memory like it was scripture. Her yard was a manicured masterpiece, of course. Not a blade of grass dared misbehave. Garden gnomes were banned, bird feeders were subject to height restrictions, and don't even think about installing a wind chime unless it was HOA approved for decibel level. Karen had created a kind of artificial perfection around her home, a sterile elegance that looked like it had been plucked from a real estate brochure and sucked free of joy. She was the type of person who always smiled when delivering bad news. "I hate to be the bearer of bad news," she'd say, before telling you that your porch lights were 12 lumens over the neighborhood standard. Or, "You understand, of course, this isn't personal. right after fining you for using non-conforming mulch in your flower bed. Everything with her was cloaked in bureaucracy. If you dared question her decisions, she'd retreat behind bylaws and subclauses, flipping through a dog-eared rule book like a lawyer in a courtroom drama. And she had a reputation, not just among the neighbors, but online. There were whispers of Karen terrorizing a previous HOA before she moved into ours. One rumor said she tried to evict a family for painting their mailbox the wrong shade of black. Another claimed she once reported a backyard barbecue to the fire department because she wasn't formally invited. I never verified those stories, but after living next to her for 2 years, I didn't need to. I believed them. She had a routine too. Every morning at 9 a.m. sharp, she walked Sparkles around the block, waving to people she liked, mainly other rule enforcers, or those who decorated their driveways according to seasonal guidelines, and glaring at everyone else like they were illegal structures. And every week, like clockwork, she filed at least one formal HOA complaint. It was her version of a hobby. For the longest time, I stayed out of her way. I trimmed my hedges, kept my porch clean, and painted my mailbox exactly the color listed in the handbook. I thought if I followed the rules, she'd leave me alone. But compliance was never enough for Karen. She didn't just want order, she wanted control. And now, with my missing packages and her conveniently timed walks, I was starting to see the full picture. She wasn't just enforcing rules, she was using them like camouflage. Like a magician who distracted you with technicalities while pocketing your watch. Karen had built an empire of petty power, and I'd been living under it for far too long. That's when I made a decision. If she wanted to play queen of the cul-de-sac, I'd let her. But every queen eventually faces rebellion. And mine? Well, mine was going to sparkle. I didn't want to jump straight into revenge. At first, I honestly hoped I was wrong. Maybe the packages had just been misplaced. Maybe some rogue postal error had sent my dog food and tech gadgets into the arms of an unsuspecting neighbor. But after the third box vanished without a trace, and Karen just happened to host an emergency HOA landscaping audit on my block the very same day, something inside me snapped. Not in a loud, shouting, stomp on the lawn kind of way, but in that quiet, focused way that usually leads to late-night scheming and questionable Amazon purchases. So I did what anyone would do in my position. I started watching YouTube videos, lots of them. Tutorials, prank compilations, fail montages. I typed in phrases like package thief glitter trap, how to ruin someone's day without breaking the law, and legal consequences of prank devices. Turns out, there's an entire subculture of people out there waging tiny wars against porch pirates, using everything from confetti cannons to spring-loaded stink bombs. It was like opening a door to a secret society of mildly unhinged justice seekers, and I felt right at home. The idea came to me while watching a video of a guy who had engineered a glitter bomb with a GPS tracker, 4 cameras, and a canister of compressed air designed to launch glitter in a full 360-degree arc. It was glorious. The thief in the video opened the box, and in an instant, he was transformed into a disco ball of shame. The glitter clung to his skin, his clothes, his couch. It was everywhere. And I thought to myself, that's what Karen needs. Not destruction, not vandalism. Just poetic, sparkly humiliation. But I didn't have a degree in engineering or a background in robotics, so I scaled things back. I ordered a small motion-activated glitter device online. It was meant for birthday surprises, but with a few tweaks, thank you, Reddit, I could turn it into a low-tech justice machine. I fitted it inside a recycled Amazon box, one with just enough heft to look tempting, but not heavy enough to raise suspicion. The device was set to trigger when the lid was lifted. Inside, I poured 2 full tubes of biodegradable glitter. Not the chunky craft store kind. No, This was the ultra-fine, hairline-infiltrating, never-leaves-your-carpet type. I chose gold and pink. Subtle, yet dramatic. But I wasn't done. Because if Karen really was the thief, and if she opened the box inside her pristine home or, better yet, inside her beige leather SUV, I wanted there to be an encore. So I added a tiny vial of stink spray. Just a few drops, really, but the kind that smelled like a locker room wrapped in expired cheese. The kind you never forget. I tucked the device into place, sealed the box, and wrote a fake return address label on the front. Delicate, handcrafted pottery, fragile. The kind of thing Karen wouldn't be able to resist confiscating for the community's safety. I didn't stop there. I mounted a small camera inside a flower pot on my porch and angled it just right. The lens captured a full view of the package and the sidewalk. I tested it 4 times, recording myself lifting the lid, just to be sure the glitter deployed correctly and the spray didn't leak. Every time it worked, and every time I laughed harder than the last. Then I waited. For 2 days, the box sat untouched. The mail carrier came and went. Neighbors passed by without a second glance, and I started to think maybe Karen had gotten spooked. But on the 3rd morning, at exactly 9:07 a.m., right on schedule, I saw her approach. Clipboard in hand, Sparkles trotting alongside her like a furry lieutenant. She paused, glanced at the package, looked around casually, then bent down. She picked it up like she was straightening a doormat, not even blinking. She tucked it into her tote bag and walked away like it was just another HOA duty. I stared at the footage in stunned silence. She didn't hesitate. She didn't check the label. She didn't knock on my door or leave a note. She just took it. And she had no idea what she had just invited into her house. In that moment, I didn't feel anger. I felt exhilaration. I wasn't just catching her. I was catching her on camera, with a box full of karmic confetti ready to explode. My hands were already shaking with anticipation. Because I knew the exact moment she opened it, everything would change. Karen was about to meet her match, and it was covered in glitter. The morning air was unusually crisp for our neighborhood, like even the weather knew something big was about to happen. I stepped out in my hoodie, coffee in hand, and glanced at the package sitting perfectly on the welcome mat. It looked innocent, ordinary, a brown cardboard box with a neat white label and a fake tracking barcode I printed from a generator online. Inside it, the glitter bomb was fully armed and ready, waiting for its unsuspecting victim. I took a deep breath, nodded to the flower pot camera, and went back inside to wait. The thing about setting a trap is that it teaches you patience in the most infuriating way. You start questioning yourself. Did I arm the trigger correctly? Will she even take the bait? What if some random kid grabs it first? I paced the living room like a detective on a bad cop show. Every creak of the floor made me peek out the window. Every bark from Sparkles made my stomach tighten. I checked the live feed every 10 minutes, refreshing like my life depended on it. Nothing. Just a box baking in the sun. That first day passed in silence. No one touched the package. A couple of delivery drivers came and went, but they gave it wide berth. A neighborhood jogger paused to tie his shoe, gave it a glance, then moved on. For a moment, I thought maybe Karen had picked up on the scent of resistance. Maybe she'd heard whispers. Maybe, just maybe, she was smarter than I gave her credit for. But day 2 rolled in, and with it came renewed confidence. I woke up early, fluffed the package slightly so it didn't look staged, and even adjusted the shadow angle for better lighting on camera. My phone buzzed with a reminder I had set. Today's the day. I chuckled to myself, sipping my tea like a villain in a comic book. The camera was recording. The bait was gleaming in the morning sun. All that was left was the thief. Then, at 9:07 a.m., like clockwork, Karen appeared. She didn't stroll casually. No, she strutted, like she always did, like the sidewalk was hers and the rest of us were merely renting oxygen. Sparkles was in some kind of neon tutu today, which I assumed meant it was a holiday I didn't know about, or Karen had run out of new outfits and was improvising. The clipboard was in her left hand. Her oversized tote bag hung from her right shoulder. She looked both harmless and utterly untrustworthy. She passed my neighbor's house, glanced up at the sky as if to say, "Good morning" to the sun, and then she saw the package. Her eyes flicked to the box, then to my door, then back to the box. For a moment she paused. My heart stopped. She knew. She had to know. But no. She bent down. And then it happened. Like she was straightening a crooked doormat, she casually scooped up the package and slid it into her bag without a hint of shame. Sparkles yapped once, maybe in celebration, and then Karen just kept walking. I stood there in the hallway, hands clenched, barely breathing. I ran to my laptop, rewound the footage, and played it again. There it was. The moment the queen of the cul-de-sac committed her final porch crime on camera. It wasn't just a catch, it was cinematic. The sun hitting her sunglasses just right. The glitter bomb inches from detonation. The smug little smile on her face. It was better than I ever could have planned. And then I waited. I knew she wouldn't open it outside. She was too calculated for that. Karen did everything behind closed doors where HOA bylaws reigned supreme. She'd open it in her kitchen, or maybe her living room. Probably on a doily-covered table beside a vase of sterile flowers. And when she did, the trap would spring. The box would pop open. The glitter would fire like a confetti cannon straight out of a clown's fever dream. And the stink spray, oh, the stink spray, would follow a beat later, like a punchline in an expensive perfume had gone horribly wrong. I imagined her screaming, trying to claw glitter out of her hair while Sparkles barked in horror. I pictured her dropping the box, slipping in the sparkling chaos, then finally realizing, someone had drawn the line. The minutes crawled by. No word. No scream from down the street. But I didn't need to hear it. I knew it had happened. And sure enough, about an hour later, the neighborhood group chat, which Karen usually used to issue passive-aggressive reminders about recycling bins, started buzzing. Did anyone else hear that weird noise from Karen's house? I saw her running outside with sparkles all over her jacket. Literal sparkles. Was that a fart smell? I couldn't stop smiling. The bait had been deployed. The trap had been set. And Karen had walked straight into it without a clue. She thought she was stealing power. Instead, she stole a glitter bomb from a man who had simply had enough. It didn't take long for the aftermath to show itself. Not in a loud, screaming meltdown, at least not at first, but in quiet, poetic details. I noticed it the moment I stepped outside later that afternoon, pretending to check my mailbox just to catch a glimpse of her house. Karen's front door was wide open. That was the first sign. The second was the unmistakable shimmer of something golden clinging to the welcome mat like dust from a parade. And then there was the sound, an odd rhythmic thwacking, as if someone was smacking a rug, again and again, trying to exorcise the sin from the fibers. Karen stood just inside her entryway, wielding what looked like a Swiffer mop with both hands, furiously scrubbing at her floor, while muttering in a tone only the truly unhinged managed to master. Her hair, once a lacquered helmet of suburban dominance, was now frizzy and half pulled into a ponytail that leaned left like it had given up halfway through the fight. Her face, flushed and covered in streaks of what looked like pink shimmer, contorted every few seconds into a grimace of rage. From across the street, I could see sparkles darting back and forth in the living room, leaving tiny paw prints of glitter in every direction. Every now and then, the dog would sneeze, an overdramatic, cartoonish thing, and collapse into a tiny puff of sequins, There was glitter in the curtains, glitter in the air vents, glitter clinging to the screen door like a spiderweb made of vengeance. And that wasn't even the worst of it, because eventually the scent hit me. Even standing on the sidewalk, I caught a hint of it. Something awful and sour, like an old gym sock soaked in expired Parmesan. The stink spray had deployed beautifully. Karen must have opened the box indoors, maybe even close to her prized faux marble countertop. I pictured the moment it happened. The lid lifting, the spring firing, the explosion of sparkle, the tiny canister releasing its olfactory horror into her temple of order. Inside my house, I rewound the camera footage, frame by glorious frame. Karen, mid-stride, package in hand. Karen stopping in her doorway. Karen vanishing inside. There wasn't footage of the actual moment. I'd kept the camera outside to stay legal, but I didn't need it. The neighborhood provided all the post-credits scenes I could ever want. A teenager posted on the local Discord server that he'd seen Karen come out yelling about biohazards and waving a glitter-stained tote bag like it had betrayed her. Another neighbor texted me a blurry photo of her front lawn, which now looked like a unicorn had exploded and tried to hide the evidence under a rug. By 5 p.m., the street was buzzing. Not officially, of course. People kept their voices down, but I could see it in the sideways glances, the sudden uptick in neighborly visits, the way someone brought popcorn out onto their porch and just sat, watching her house like it was primetime television. Even Ed from the HOA board, usually Karen's loyal second-in-command, walked by with his dog and failed to suppress a smirk. The crowning moment came at 5:42 p.m. sharp. Karen stormed outside holding the now deflated package like it was radioactive. She was covered in glitter. Her blazer, her shoes, her forehead, even the tips of her ears. And it was clinging with the stubbornness of karma. She scanned the neighborhood with her squinting, glitter-glazed eyes and shouted into the air, "Whoever did this, this is war." A few heads poked out of windows. Someone coughed. Sparkles barked and then rolled in the grass, glitter trailing behind like fairy dust from a collapsing dream. Karen didn't get an answer. She just stood there, panting, fuming, and looking like a disco ball that had lost a fight. Eventually, she retreated inside and slammed the door, a puff of gold mist escaping the threshold, like the final breath of a defeated villain. But the damage was done. That night, clips started surfacing online. Someone had captured her walking down the street moments after the bomb went off, glitter swirling around her like she'd been crowned Queen of Chaos. Another had audio, Karen screaming into her phone about chemical warfare and Sue-worthy trauma. Someone slowed it down and set it to opera music. The video hit 1,000 views by midnight. My phone lit up with messages, friends from college, distant cousins. Even Travis, a guy I hadn't spoken to since sophomore year, texted, "Dude, is this your Karen? Glitter bomb gate." And that's when it hit me. This wasn't just neighborhood justice. This was viral. This was content. I didn't plan for it to be. I wasn't trying to humiliate her for likes. But in a world desperate for a little absurdity and comeuppance, Karen had just become a meme, and I was the anonymous craftsman behind the curtain. I went to bed that night smiling, not because I'd gotten revenge, but because I had finally struck back without saying a single word. Karen had stolen dozens of packages, terrorized the street, and hid behind regulations and technicalities. But in the end, all it took was a cardboard box and a little sparkle to knock the crown right off her head. The next morning began the same as any other. Sunlight slid through the blinds, birds chirped like nothing had changed, and my coffee brewed with its usual gurgle. But the moment I stepped outside to retrieve the actual legitimate package that had just arrived, I knew peace was over. Parked squarely in front of my house was Karen's silver SUV, clean except for the faintest dusting of glitter that still clung stubbornly to the edges of her windshield wipers, a quiet reminder of the glitter apocalypse that had unfolded the day before. She was waiting for me. Arms crossed, blazer buttoned, lips pressed into a single furious hyphen. Sparkles wasn't with her. That's how I knew she meant business. I took my time walking down the porch steps, cradling my coffee like it was a shield. Karen didn't speak right away. She waited until I was on the last step before launching into her assault. "This is harassment," she said, her voice sharp and tight like piano wire. It was targeted, malicious, and completely beneath the standards of this community. I raised an eyebrow. "You mean the standards that allow unauthorized borrowing of packages?" Her nostrils flared, and I swear for a second she looked like she might try to physically remove the words from the air. "I was protecting the neighborhood," she snapped. "There have been reports of unattended packages. I was gathering them for safekeeping." "In your living room?" I sipped my coffee. "Under your chandelier? Next to your yoga mat and antique globe collection?" Her silence said more than words. She wasn't here to debate. She was here to re-establish control, to remind me and the rest of the street that she still held the scepter. The glitter bomb had humiliated her, but it hadn't broken her. It had wounded the queen, not dethroned her. And now, with whatever power she had left, she was drawing her sword. "You'll be receiving a formal violation notice," she said, reaching into her leather folder and pulling out a crisp document like a magician revealing a very boring trick. "For reckless endangerment, unauthorized use of devices, and for disturbing the peace of a sanctioned HOA official." "Sanctioned?" I asked. I didn't realize stealing packages came with a badge. Her hand shook as she thrust the paper toward me, and for a moment, just a moment, I saw something behind her eyes. Not rage, not even embarrassment, but panic. The tight, twitchy kind that blooms when someone realizes their armor is cracking and there's no patch kit in sight. Karen wasn't just angry. She was losing her grip, and that terrified her more than anything else. I took the notice, scanned it lazily, and looked back at her. "Thanks," I said. "I'll frame it next to the HOA fine I got for having a bird bath in the wrong shade of beige." "You think this is funny?" she hissed. "You think you're some kind of hero?" "I think I'm just tired of letting you walk all over people." Her jaw clenched, and she turned on her heel, stomping back to her SUV. But she didn't leave right away. She sat there for a while, engine running, probably composing her next move like a general plotting troop deployment. That afternoon, I got a call from Deborah, one of the other HOA board members. She sounded hesitant, apologetic. "I just wanted to give you a heads up," she said. "Karen's filing a motion to have your voting rights suspended within the HOA for 6 months. "Can she do that?" I asked. "She's citing public nuisance and misconduct. She's stretching, but technically it'll go to a vote." I laughed, genuinely. "Let me guess. Emergency board meeting tomorrow?" "Tonight, actually. 7 p.m. Community Center. She's calling it Restoring Dignity to the HOA. Of course she was. By the time I arrived that evening, the parking lot was more crowded than I'd ever seen it. People who hadn't shown up to a meeting in years were filing into the stuffy little building, whispering and chuckling. The glitter story had spread like wildfire, and no one wanted to miss the showdown. Karen stood at the front like a disgraced pageant queen making a last-minute bid for the crown. She had her documents, she had her talking points, but what she didn't have, what she couldn't fake, was the trust she'd lost. That was written on every smirking face, every poorly concealed laugh, every phone held low recording, just in case something juicy happened. She read her statement with all the drama of a courtroom monologue, talking about violations, emotional distress, even the potential toxicity of prolonged glitter exposure. It would have been hilarious if it wasn't so desperately sad. By the time she finished, you could practically hear the crickets, and one very loud snort from the back row. Then someone raised their hand. It was edited. Soft-spoken, always confused Ed, who usually just nodded along to whatever Karen said. He cleared his throat and said, watched the video. And, yeah, maybe don't steal packages. And just like that, the room turned. Karen wasn't just declaring war anymore. She was fighting it alone. And it was already too late. In the days that followed the meeting, something began to shift. Not loudly, not all at once, but with the slow, deliberate rhythm of a neighborhood waking up from a long, glittery coma. Karen still walked her route, still had sparkles dressed like a mini Macy's window display, still clutched her clipboard, like it could shield her from the truth. But something was different. People stopped moving out of her way. They stopped nodding out of habit. They stopped pretending. The silence that used to surround Karen, that bubble of compliance she carried like perfume, began to crack. It started with Mr. Howell, the elderly man 2 houses down, who for years had painted his fence in secret at night, just to avoid a citation. On the following Saturday, he painted his entire mailbox during broad daylight, and used a bright teal that was definitely not HOA approved. No one said a word. In fact, 2 neighbors walked by and told him it looked great. He beamed like a man freed from prison. Then came the yard decorations. First, it was a single flamingo, pink, plastic, and proudly perched in front of the Jensen's house. The next day, a second flamingo appeared across the street. By the end of the week, a whole flock had taken root on lawns all around the block. Someone even made tiny signs that read, "Flight Club, first rule, always flaunt it." It was absurd and wonderful, and not a single HOA violation was filed. The wind chimes came next, tinkling, melodic, and defiantly cheerful. Karen used to hate them, said they disrupted the audio harmony of the neighborhood. But now, they rang like laughter in the breeze. You could hear them from almost every corner of the street, a kind of musical rebellion that sounded like freedom. At one point, I spotted someone hanging a set from their porch, while another neighbor stood guard holding a Nerf gun, just in case Karen tried to intervene. But the real turning point came when the neighborhood started talking, really talking. People who had once waved politely and then retreated indoors began lingering on sidewalks, chatting in driveways, sharing stories about fines and warnings and passive-aggressive notes slipped under doors. Turns out almost everyone had a Karen story. The woman who got cited for planting sunflowers too close to the sidewalk. The man who was fined for leaving his Christmas lights up one day past January 6th. The teenage girl who got a warning letter because her garage band was practicing at unapproved volumes, even though they were just playing acoustic guitar on a Saturday afternoon. One by one, the stories came out, and with them, laughter. Frustration turned into jokes. Jokes turned into solidarity. And solidarity turned into something Karen couldn't control. I watched it unfold from my front steps, sipping coffee like I was front row at a revolution. People were no longer afraid. They were no longer cautious. They were reclaiming their space, their peace, and their personalities. Kids who used to play quietly now whooped and screamed with joy as they rode bikes and drew chalk monsters on sidewalks. Someone spray-painted a hopscotch path directly onto the asphalt. No one erased it. For the first time, the neighborhood felt alive. And Karen, she didn't vanish. Not yet. She still showed up to meetings, still tried to enforce rules, still muttered about community standards, like they were sacred texts. But her power had been hollowed out. Her words bounced off walls and fell flat. When she barked orders, people just smiled politely and walked away. When she demanded changes, the board said they'd take it under review, which was code for never again. Even Deborah, her longtime ally, had started speaking up. At one point during a board session, when Karen suggested reissuing citations for decorative flags that clashed with the seasonal aesthetic, Deborah just blinked and said, "Let people enjoy things, Karen. The room laughed. Karen didn't. At night, porch lights stayed on longer. Groups of neighbors gathered outside to share snacks and beers and memories of what the neighborhood used to be. They called it Glitter Hour. And yes, someone actually brought a glittery disco ball one evening. There was no music, no speeches, just people, connecting, finally free from the chokehold of fear disguised as order. It wasn't about me, not really. I had just been the spark. The glitter bomb hadn't just hit Karen's living room. It had hit the invisible wall she'd built around the whole community. And once that wall cracked, everyone realized they'd been trapped inside something that looked safe, but felt suffocating. The neighborhood wasn't perfect now, but it was better, brighter, louder in the best way. And for the first time in years when I looked around, I didn't see just houses. I saw life. I saw people being people. And somewhere, behind her tightly drawn blinds, Karen watched it all unfold. Powerless, silent, and sparkling just a little around the edges. The end didn't come with a dramatic explosion or a neighborhood-wide protest. It came quietly, almost politely, like the final page of a long, exhausting book that everyone had been reading out of obligation. Karen's downfall wasn't a single moment, but a series of little cracks that finally split the dam. And when it did, there was no stopping the flood. The first sign came in the form of a petition, simple, black and white, and slipped into mailboxes on a Friday morning. It didn't have fireworks, no fiery manifesto, just a single statement. Request for a vote of no confidence in current HOA leadership. No one had to ask who it was about. There were no other suspects. I found mine tucked between an ad for discounted gutter cleaning and a coupon for half-off frozen yogurt. The petition was signed anonymously at the bottom, though later we'd all learn it had started with Mr. Howell. The man had spent most of the past decade hiding from Karen's rule, and now he was leading the charge. That alone made me want to frame the paper. What followed was nothing short of beautiful. Signatures flowed in, not from the usual troublemakers or loudmouths, but from quiet, respectable folks, the kind who normally wouldn't rock the boat. Teachers, retirees, single parents, people who had spent years biting their tongues now finding their voices. They didn't yell, they didn't scream, they just signed. And within 72 hours, over 75% of the neighborhood had added their names to the cause. Karen knew, of course. She saw it happening, watched the tide pull away from her, leaving her standing alone on the beach, screaming into the wind. But she didn't fight back, not in the way we expected. She didn't call a meeting or stage a rebuttal. She didn't issue a memo or threaten lawsuits. She just went quiet. On the night the vote was finalized, she didn't show. The community center was packed, every seat taken, the air buzzing with anticipation. We waited, half expecting her to burst through the doors in a blaze of pink blazers and indignation. But the seat marked president remained empty. Deborah called the meeting to order, read the results, and that was it. Karen was removed. No applause, no cheering, just a quiet collective breath, like the whole neighborhood exhaled at once. The next morning, a for sale sign appeared in her yard. No announcement, no farewell email, no passive-aggressive note about how she had tried to make things better. Just the sign, white and red, posted on the edge of her perfect lawn. A week later it read, "Sold." She moved out early on a Wednesday. I watched from my window as a moving van backed into her driveway, and two strangers loaded boxes into the truck. Karen didn't pack herself. She didn't direct. She stood off to the side, arms folded, sunglasses on despite the overcast sky, as if that final layer of tinted glass could protect her from the eyes watching behind curtains. No one came out to wave. No one offered help. It wasn't anger. It wasn't pettiness. It was silence. The kind of silence that says everything. And then she was gone. Her house stood empty for a few weeks, and something about that made the victory feel more complete. The corner lot that once loomed over us like a surveillance tower had become just another house. No more daily patrols, no more notes on doors, no more rules twisted into weapons, just shutters and bricks, and a front yard that no longer told people to behave. Karen didn't get justice in the way most people imagine it. There was no trial, no scandal splashed across headlines. But what she got was more powerful. She lost the one thing she valued more than control: attention. She became irrelevant, an afterthought, a warning. And we moved on. Life in the neighborhood didn't just return to normal, it evolved. Meetings were now open forums. Complaints turned into conversations. People planted sunflowers in their front yards and hung flags without fear. The community didn't just remove Karen. We reclaimed something bigger, ourselves. And in the quiet that followed, with the wind chimes singing gently across the street and laughter echoing from yards once silenced, it was clear. Justice had come. Softly, but completely. After Karen left, the neighborhood didn't erupt into celebration. There were no banners strung across driveways or fireworks lighting up the cul-de-sac. It was quieter than that. Better. It was as if a weight had been lifted. One we hadn't realized we were carrying until it was finally gone. The silence she left behind wasn't empty. It was peaceful. It made room for something new. I walked out one morning to find kids drawing hopscotch lines across the sidewalks in chalk, their laughter spilling into the street without anyone shushing them. Wind chimes clinked gently from porches that had once been bare for fear of being too whimsical. One neighbor painted their mailbox bright yellow. Another planted an entire bed of sunflowers, the kind Karen used to frown at for visual inconsistency. And no one stopped them. No warning letters, no citations, just smiles and nods and casual compliments. The HOA meetings didn't vanish, they just changed. More people showed up, not out of fear, but out of interest. There was coffee, sometimes cookies, and actual dialogue. People listened. Ideas were shared, not shut down. A suggestion box appeared near the clubhouse, and, for the first time in recent memory, people actually used it. The new board included Deborah and 2 other residents with reputations for reason, kindness, and not measuring grass with a ruler. As for me, I didn't become a symbol on purpose, but somehow the glitter bomb incident turned into a neighborhood legend. Folks still talk about it in passing, shaking their heads with grins they don't try to hide. Some even joke about setting up Freedom Day, an annual celebration of the day the glitter flew and Karen fell. I always laugh, but I keep my role humble. I didn't do it to become a hero. I did it because someone needed to push back. There's still a faint shimmer of glitter near the base of my mailbox. No matter how many times it rains, a little sparkle always seems to linger. And I don't mind. It's a reminder of standing up, of reclaiming space, of choosing creativity over conflict and sparkles over silence. It turns out growth doesn't always come from peace. Sometimes it comes from chaos. Beautiful, biodegradable chaos. Not every neighborhood battle has a clear villain. Not every porch pirate wears a mask. And not every act of justice needs to be loud or violent. Sometimes it just needs glitter. What started with missing packages turned into something much bigger. A moment where one person decided not to stay silent, not to play along, and not to let pettiness go unanswered. I didn't fight back with rage. I didn't scream or threaten. I used a cardboard box, a little sparkle, and a sense of humor. And somehow, that was enough to flip an entire street on its head. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. You don't need to be loud to be powerful. You just need to be deliberate. You need to be clever. And you need to be done being pushed around. So if you've ever felt small in your own home, Ever felt watched or judged or boxed in by someone who thinks their clipboard gives them control? Just remember this story. Remember what a little creativity can do, what a single well-timed glitter bomb can set in motion. And maybe, just maybe, your own neighborhood revolution is one package away. Thanks for watching, and keep your sparkle loaded.